I was in the middle of handing a stack of notarized bank statements to the director of the FBI's Public Corruption Unit when the front wall of my farmhouse shook violently. Dust rained down from the ceiling rafters, landing right in our coffee mugs. A split second later, the roar of a diesel engine completely drowned out the birdsong I'd moved all the way out here to enjoy. I looked out the window and saw a massive yellow bulldozer blade pressing against my porch railing, and standing on the hood, screaming into a megaphone, was the mayor of our town. My name is Thomas Vance. I'm a 58-year-old retired forensic accountant who spent 30 years auditing Fortune 500 companies for fraud. I moved to this sleepy county to grow tomatoes and forget all about cooked books. But Mayor Greg, the bulldozer Higgins, didn't care about my tomatoes. He cared about the aquifer under my land, which he secretly promised to a bottling company for a kickback that would fund his very comfortable retirement. The training from my previous career taught me one thing: follow the paper trail until it leads to the rot at the center. I spent 3 decades dissecting complex financial webs and testifying in federal court cases that sent high-level executives to prison. My specialty was detecting those subtle patterns of embezzlement and bribery that most people just overlook. When I retired, I thought I was done with the dark side of human greed. I bought the old Miller place because it was secluded and peaceful. Sure, it was a wreck, the barn was leaning, and the house needed a good coat of paint, but it was mine. I didn't realize that to a man like Mayor Higgins, my peaceful retirement was just an obstacle to a multi-million-dollar payday. Higgins first showed up about 3 months after I moved in. He didn't come with a welcome basket. He came in a black SUV with official city business stamped on the door. He told me the farm was blighted and that the city was exercising eminent domain for a new logistics center. Well, I knew the law better than he did. I knew that blight is a very subjective term, often used as a weapon for land grabs. I told him I wasn't selling. He told me I'd regret it. The harassment started the very next week. First, it was daily citations for noise pollution because I was running a lawnmower. Then, the city water line to my property was accidentally cut during roadwork, and the city refused to fix it for a month. Finally, a predatory emergency condemnation notice was slapped on my front door, claiming the house was structurally unsound and a threat to the community. I didn't panic. I went to work. I used my old skills to audit the city's development records. I found that the so-called logistics center was just a front for a water bottling plant owned by a shell company. I traced that shell company back to a series of offshore accounts that, very conveniently, shared an address with the mayor's private consulting firm. I documented every single bribe, every forged signature, and every secret meeting. Then, I called Robert Sterling, the special agent in charge of the FBI's Regional Anti-Corruption Task Force. We had worked together on the Enron fallout, and he was the only man I trusted to handle a small-town tyrant with big city connections. That brings us back to the moment the bulldozer hit my porch. Higgins was standing there, red-faced and sweating, convinced he was about to destroy the evidence of his crimes, right along with my home. He thought I was just some stubborn old man in a flannel shirt. He had no idea that the guest in my kitchen was a federal agent holding a signed arrest warrant. "Come out, Vance, this is your final warning." Higgins screamed into the megaphone. "The structure is being leveled for public safety. Any interference will result in immediate arrest." I walked out onto the porch, followed by Robert Sterling. The air was thick with the smell of diesel and the sound of the bulldozer's idling engine. 2 of Higgins' hand-picked compliance officers, men who looked more like hired thugs than city employees, stood by the trucks, their hands resting on their holsters. "Turn off the engine." "Greg," I said, my voice carrying over the noise. "You're making a very expensive mistake." Higgins laughed, a jagged, desperate sound. "The only mistake here was you thinking you could stand in the way of progress. This land belongs to the city now. Tear it down." The bulldozer operator hesitated, looking at Sterling. Unlike me, Sterling was wearing a suit that probably cost more than the mayor's car, and he carried an aura of absolute authority. I said, "Tear it down." Higgins shrieked, jumping off the hood and marching toward the steps. "Deputy, arrest this man for obstruction of a municipal order." One of the thugs moved toward me, reaching for his handcuffs. "Stop right there," Sterling said. He didn't raise his voice, but the command was absolute. He reached into his jacket and produced his FBI credentials. "Special Agent in charge, Robert Sterling. This property is currently under federal protection as part of an ongoing criminal investigation. If you touch that railing again, you'll be facing charges of interfering with a federal agent." The color drained from Higgins' face so fast I thought he might faint. He looked at the badge, then at me, then at the thick file sitting on my patio table. "FBI," Higgins stammered. This is a local zoning issue. You have no business here." "Actually, Greg, we have plenty of business," Sterling said, stepping down the stairs. "We have the wiretaps from your meetings with the bottling company. We have the records of the $3 million you moved through the Cayman Islands. And we have the forensic audit of the city's emergency funds that you used to pay for this bulldozer." As Sterling spoke, 4 unmarked black SUVs roared up the dirt driveway, kicking up a massive cloud of dust. A dozen tactical agents in FBI jackets poured out, weapons drawn. They moved with the surgical precision I remembered from my days in the field. Within seconds, the compliance officers were disarmed and face down in the dirt. Higgins tried to run toward his SUV, but he didn't even make it 5 feet. 2 agents tackled him, pinning him against the yellow paint of the bulldozer he'd brought to destroy my life. Thomas Vance. Higgins screamed as the handcuffs ratcheted shut. You set me up. You're just a bean counter. You're nothing. I am a bean counter, Greg, I said, leaning against the porch railing he'd tried to crush. And I've been counting yours for months. You're about 3 million short and 15 years over. The aftermath was a whirlwind. The FBI raided City Hall that afternoon, hauling out boxes of evidence that implicated half the city council. The logistics center project was scrapped, the water bottling plant's permits were revoked, and the land was returned to its rightful zoning. It turned out Higgins had been running the town like a personal fiefdom for a decade, bullying anyone who couldn't fight back. He just happened to pick the one person who knew exactly how to dismantle a criminal empire from the inside out. Higgins is currently serving 16 years in a federal penitentiary for RICO violations, bribery, and money laundering. His compliance officers took plea deals and testified against him. The old Miller place is no longer blighted. I used a small portion of the settlement from the civil suit I filed against the city to restore the barn and paint the house. Sometimes, late in the evening, I sit on that same porch and watch the sunset over the fields. The tomatoes are coming in nicely this year. The silence is back, and it's the most valuable thing I own. The lesson here is simple. Never assume the person you're rebullying doesn't have a bigger stick hidden behind the door. Arrogance is a blindfold that prevents you from seeing the trap until it's already snapped shut. Higgins thought he was the apex predator of this county, but he forgot that in the world of high-stakes fraud, the man with the ledger is the one who decides who survives. If you're facing a corrupt official or an entitled local tyrant, don't scream and don't fight in the streets. Collect the data. Follow the money. Find the people whose job it is to care about the truth. Because at the end of the day, a bulldozer can crush a house, but it can't crush a federal indictment. Thanks for watching this story of justice served. If you've ever had to stand up to a corrupt official, share your experience in the comments. And remember to hit that subscribe button. VA got plenty more stories about what happens when the little guy decides to fight back with the truth.